Wouldn't it be like the most petty, humiliating, yet startling thing if I just fired my hat at?
Ron Howard has finally spoken with full honesty about Andy Griffith, the man who shaped his childhood and helped guide his entire life in the entertainment world. For years, fans of the Andy Griffith Show wondered how Ron felt about the man who played his on-screen father. People often asked why Ron rarely talked about Andy in long interviews, and why he always kept his words short and simple when asked about their relationship. Now, after so many years of keeping certain memories to himself, Ron has opened up more than ever. He explained what Andy meant to him as a mentor, a friend, and almost a second parent. To understand the full story, we must go all the way back to the beginning, when young Ron first entered the world of television. Ron Howard, born on March 1, 1954, seemed to be destined for a life in front of the camera. His parents, Rance and Jean Howard, were both actors, and they introduced him to acting before he even understood what fame was. Ron was only 15 months old when he appeared in his first commercial, and by the time he was 5, he already had film credits. His home life was very different from the normal childhood of kids his age. While some children played outside or went to school without stress, Ron was being coached on how to memorize lines, stand in front of cameras, and behave on set. Even though he was a small child, he learned discipline early. His father spent long hours teaching him how to speak clearly, express emotion, and be natural in front of the camera. These lessons helped Ron stand out among young actors who sometimes looked stiff or unsure. But despite being surrounded by bright lights and busy film crews, Ron always carried with him a simple upbringing, one that he said later reminded him of everything Andy Griffith stood for. Ron's early experiences prepared him for the biggest moment of his young life, auditioning for the role of Opie Taylor, the son of the kind and wise Sheriff Andy Taylor. When Ron first walked onto the set of the Andy Griffith Show at just 6 years old, he was nervous. The studio seemed huge to him. There were cameras, lights, people moving around quickly, and adults speaking in serious tones. But everything changed when he met Andy Griffith. Andy greeted him with a warm smile and a gentle handshake, and that moment instantly made Ron feel safe. Ron remembers this moment very clearly, saying Andy had a way of making him feel seen, even though Ron was only a little boy. During his audition, Ron performed a monologue about a broken toy, and he gave such a heartfelt performance that the casting directors were moved to tears. Andy, who watched the audition, was amazed. He later told Ron that he saw a spark in him, a spark Andy recognized because he had once been a young actor trying to prove himself too. Andy did not treat Ron like a child who was just filling a role. Instead, he treated him like a partner, someone important to the show. This respect built the foundation of their strong bond. As filming continued, Andy became more than just a co-star. He became a mentor and, in many ways, a father figure. Ron said that Andy taught him lessons that he would carry forever. Andy explained scripts to him, helped him understand the meaning behind lines, and encouraged him to explore the emotions of the scenes. When Ron struggled with expressing sadness or fear, Andy would kneel beside him and say, "Think about a moment when you felt the same way. You don't have to force the emotion, just let it come to you." This kind guidance helped Ron become one of the most natural young actors on television. Andy also taught Ron something far deeper than acting. He taught him patience. Being a child actor meant long hours, repeated scenes, and waiting for camera setups. Ron sometimes grew restless or tired, but Andy knew exactly how to help. He would tell jokes, play small games, or share stories about growing up in North Carolina during the Great Depression. Ron said that hearing Andy's stories made him feel calm and connected. Andy's gentle teaching style helped Ron feel safe, happy, and supported, not just as an actor, but as a child learning about the world. Their connection continued to grow, and cast members noticed how close they became. Some even said the whole tone of the show became warmer because of their real friendship. Andy also cared about Ron's family. He made sure Ron's parents felt involved and respected. He invited them to his home, shared meals with them, and always checked in to make sure Ron wasn't overwhelmed. Off the set, Andy taught Ron simple life skills, like playing guitar, understanding responsibility, and staying humble. Andy always said, "Fame comes and goes, but who you are inside lasts forever." Ron would remember those words long into adulthood. The show itself became a massive hit, partly because of the loving and believable father-son relationship between Andy and Opie. Fans saw something real on screen, something gentle and pure, and it touched millions of hearts. But behind those scenes was a real bond that helped shape Ron's entire future. Even after the show ended, Ron carried everything he learned from Andy into his personal life and his directing career. But Andy also had his own story, a story of hardship, success, privacy, and humility. And understanding Andy's life helps us understand why he and Ron were so close. Andy Griffith was born in Mount Airy, North Carolina, a small town that later inspired the fictional town of Mayberry. Andy grew up poor during the Great Depression. His parents struggled, but they worked hard to give him a chance at a better life. They even bought him a trombone when he was young because they knew he loved music. Andy later used those experiences to shape his gentle and wise character on The Andy Griffith Show. He often said that the show reflected what he wished the world could be: simple, kind, and full of compassion. Ron admired Andy's private nature. Andy avoided talking about his personal life in public, choosing instead to let his work speak for him. Ron said that Andy was funny, thoughtful, and very moral in real life, even more so than what people saw on television. This private side of Andy created a special trust between him and Ron. Ron knew the real Andy, the man who cared deeply about people and always tried to do the right thing. Their relationship grew every year, and Andy became a lifelong influence on Ron. But the most emotional part of their story would come much later, when Andy's health started to fade, and Ron visited him during his final days. Those last conversations are something Ron still holds close, and he has revealed only a few details, keeping the rest as a private treasure between him and the man he considered a second father. Ron Howard explained that the lessons he learned from Andy Griffith stayed with him long after the cameras stopped rolling. When The Andy Griffith Show ended in 1968, Ron was a teenager ready to explore his next chapter. Andy, too, was searching for new roles and new challenges. Although they no longer saw each other every day, the bond they created never disappeared. One of the first major challenges Ron faced after the show was figuring out who he was beyond the role of Opie Taylor. Being such a famous child actor can be difficult, because the public sometimes struggles to see you as anything else. But Andy had prepared Ron for this moment. He told Ron that real success does not come from staying in the same role forever, but from growing, learning, and finding new ways to express yourself. Ron took that advice seriously. Soon, he found a new wave of fame by playing Richie Cunningham on Happy Days. The show became a huge hit, and Ron became the face of a new generation of wholesome, family-friendly television. But even during his time on Happy Days, Ron's true interest was starting to shift toward what happened behind the camera. He loved watching directors, learning how scenes were arranged, and understanding how a story was built from the ground up. Ron said Andy influenced this interest. Andy often talked about storytelling and explained how every line, scene, and character needed purpose. Andy was not only an actor, he understood the craft in a deeper way, and Ron absorbed that knowledge. During his time on Happy Days, Ron began asking for opportunities to direct episodes. The producers agreed, and Ron quickly showed his talent. When Ron finally directed his first large film, Grand Theft Auto, in 1977, Andy reached out to congratulate him. Ron said that hearing Andy's voice on the phone that day made him emotional, because he felt like he had finally made his mentor proud. Their relationship slowly shifted from mentor-student to something more equal, like colleagues who respected one another deeply. As Ron moved into full-time directing, he created some of Hollywood's most famous movies. Films like Apollo 13 and A Beautiful Mind showed Ron's ability to balance emotion, tension, and powerful storytelling. Even as he reached the peak of his success, winning awards and becoming one of the most respected directors in the world, he always remembered the lessons Andy taught him as a child. Ron said that Andy's biggest influence was not on his acting but on his character. Andy taught him to treat everyone with respect: actors, camera workers, lighting crews, makeup artists, and assistants. Ron said he runs his film sets the same way Andy ran the set of The Andy Griffith Show: calm, respectful, and full of kindness. As Ron's directing career grew, so did his personal life. In 1975, he married Cheryl Alley, his high school sweetheart. Their marriage became one of the longest and strongest relationships in Hollywood. Together, they raised 4 children, including Bryce Dallas Howard, who grew into a talented actress and director. Ron often said that the values Andy taught him became the values he passed down to his own children. Meanwhile, Andy Griffith continued his acting career. One of his biggest successes after Mayberry was the television series Matlock. Andy played a clever lawyer and gained millions of new fans. Even as he became older, Andy remained gentle and private, staying in touch with Ron whenever possible. They would meet at events, award shows, or quiet gatherings where they caught up like old friends. Ron said that every time they met, Andy treated him with the same warmth he had shown him as a child. As Andy grew older, his health began to decline, and Ron made an effort to spend more time with him. These later visits were full of honesty and reflection. Andy talked less about acting and more about life, family, and the things he learned along the way. Ron listened carefully, knowing these were precious moments. In one of their final conversations, Andy told Ron how proud he was of the man he had become, how he turned out kind, hardworking, and dedicated to telling meaningful stories. Ron said that hearing those words from Andy felt like a final blessing from a father figure. Andy passed away on July 3, 2012. For Ron, the loss was personal and deep. He said it felt like losing a part of his childhood and a person who had shaped so much of who he was. Ron later admitted that he kept one final message Andy shared with him completely private. He said it was something meant only for him, something he would carry for the rest of his life. After Andy's death, Ron continued to honor him through interviews, documentaries, and conversations with fans. He said it was important for people to understand how much Andy meant not only to television but also to the people around him. Ron has described Andy as honest, funny, gentle, and wise. He said Andy created a world on screen that felt real because he lived his life with the same values he portrayed. Even though fans saw Andy as the perfect father figure on television, Ron knew the real man behind the scenes, the man with stories, struggles, hopes, and fears. The public saw Sheriff Andy Taylor, but Ron saw Andy Griffith, the human being. Today, Ron still speaks about Andy whenever he has the chance. He talks about the lessons he learned and how they shaped his career. Ron explains that every time he directs a scene with warmth or teaches a young actor with patience, he feels Andy's influence. Ron says that Andy helped make him the man he is today, and that their friendship will forever be one of the most important relationships in his life. Fans around the world continue to celebrate the show and the bond between Andy and Ron. Even new generations discover Mayberry and fall in love with the simple, honest world it created. Ron believes that people still connect with the show because it reminds them of decency, kindness, and genuine care, traits that Andy lived every day. In looking back at their friendship, it becomes clear that their connection went far beyond acting. It was a bond built on trust, love, guidance, and shared experiences. Ron often says that having Andy as a mentor was one of the greatest gifts of his life. He carries that gift with him always, and through his own work, he keeps Andy's spirit alive in the world of storytelling. When Ron Howard finally decided to speak more openly about Andy Griffith, it was clear that he was doing more than just sharing memories. He was giving fans a deeper understanding of the man who helped shape him, both as an actor and as a person. Ron wanted people to know the full truth, not just the polished stories that surfaced in short interviews over the years. He wanted to explain what Andy meant to him emotionally, creatively, and personally. Ron said that Andy was not perfect, but he was honest, caring, and deeply committed to helping people grow. Ron explained that Andy never tried to be a star in front of him. He simply tried to be a good person, and that had a huge impact on Ron. Ron also spoke about the reality of being a child actor. Many children in Hollywood grow up under stressful conditions, pressured to perform, and sometimes exploited. But Ron said he was lucky. Andy created a safe, warm environment for him. Ron said that Andy always protected him, made him feel important, and ensured he never felt alone on set. When Ron's school pressures increased, Andy helped him find balance. When Ron struggled with emotional scenes, Andy guided him with patience instead of strictness. When Ron grew tired, Andy helped lift his spirits. Ron said that Andy did all this quietly, not for praise, not for recognition, but simply because he cared. In speaking openly, Ron wanted the world to understand that Andy was not just a talented performer. He was a teacher, a listener, and a gentle soul. Ron said the love Andy showed him was real, and it stayed with him long after the show ended. Ron also talked about the moment he realized how much Andy had shaped his directing career. As a filmmaker, Ron always tries to help actors feel safe and supported, just as Andy supported him. Ron said he learned leadership from Andy. He learned how to guide without controlling, how to teach without lecturing, and how to be compassionate while still creating strong work. Ron also reflected on the emotional weight of visiting Andy in his later years. Seeing a man who had once been so full of energy slowly grow more fragile was heartbreaking for him. But Ron said those final visits were important because they gave him a chance to thank Andy. Ron told Andy that he would not be the man he was without him. He thanked Andy for being patient, for being kind, and for showing him the meaning of humility. Andy told Ron that he had always believed in him, that he knew Ron would grow into a good man and a strong storyteller. Ron said that hearing those words felt like a final gift from his mentor. When Ron talks about Andy now, he does so with a mix of gratitude, sadness, and pride. He knows their relationship was rare. Not every child actor is lucky enough to find a role model who treats them with such love and respect. Ron said that Andy always made him feel like family, and that is something he will never forget. Even though Andy is no longer here, Ron continues to feel his presence. He still carries Andy's words in his mind and his heart. Ron said he often finds himself saying things to young actors that sound exactly like the things Andy once told him. He laughs when this happens, because it shows how deeply Andy's influence runs through him. Ron believes that the reason people still connect to the Andy Griffith Show is because the bond between Andy and Ron was real. It wasn't just acting. Their on-screen relationship reflected a true friendship. And that honesty came through in every scene. Ron also wanted fans to understand that Andy was a private man, but not a cold one. Andy simply believed that some parts of life should be kept close, shared only with people who earn your trust. Ron said he respected this deeply. It taught him that even in a world full of cameras and attention, it is important to keep certain things sacred. One of the most touching things Ron revealed is that Andy shared one last personal message with him before passing away, something Ron has chosen not to reveal publicly. Ron said that some things are meant to stay private between two people who shared a special bond. He said that keeping Andy's last words to himself is his way of honoring the man who guided him with so much love. Ron ended his reflections by saying that Andy Griffith changed his life forever. Everything he learned about storytelling, kindness, leadership, and humility began with Andy. Ron believes that Andy's legacy lives on through every film he directs, every actor he mentors, and every story he tells. Their relationship stands as one of the greatest examples of mentorship in Hollywood history. Andy Griffith shaped Ron Howard's childhood, influenced his adult life, and left a mark on his heart that will never fade. Ron hopes that by sharing these memories, people will appreciate Andy not just as a television icon, but as a remarkable human being whose kindness touched everyone around him. Their bond reminds us that real relationships can grow in unexpected places, even on a busy television set. And because of that bond, the simple town of Mayberry, and the gentle lessons it taught, will live on for generations. Ron Howard continued to speak about Andy Griffith with deep respect as he grew older, and the more he reflected on their time together, the more he realized just how unusual their relationship had been. Many child actors do not remember their early careers with fondness. Some talk about stressful sets, strict directors, or feeling unseen and unheard. But Ron said his childhood was warm because Andy took the time to see him as more than just a little actor performing lines. Andy noticed when Ron was tired, when he was confused, and when he needed support. Ron explained that Andy would sometimes stop a scene, walk over to him, and gently ask, "Do you understand what we're trying to say here?" Those small moments made Ron feel important. They made him feel like he was part of something meaningful, not just performing for a camera. As Ron grew older and continued building his directing career, he realized that Andy had quietly planted the seeds of kindness in him from the very beginning. On movie sets, Ron became known for being patient, calm, and approachable, traits that many directors struggle to maintain under pressure. Ron said that his attitude on set is a direct reflection of Andy's influence. Andy believed that when people feel respected, their best work comes naturally. Ron carries that belief into every project he leads. He encourages actors to explore their characters, he listens to crew members' ideas, and he keeps the set atmosphere peaceful. Many actors who work with Ron say they feel safe in his hands, and they often describe him as someone who leads with both skill and heart. Ron also explained that Andy's impact reached beyond acting and directing. Andy helped him understand life itself. Andy would tell him stories from his youth in North Carolina, stories about growing up poor, learning music, finding joy in simple things, and building a meaningful life through honesty and hard work. These stories stayed in Ron's mind and later shaped the way he approached adulthood. Ron said that Andy's lessons helped him become a better husband and father. He always remembered Andy's advice about balance: work is important, but the people you love matter more. That philosophy guided Ron through the busiest years of his career, especially when he was raising his children while directing major films. Another part of Andy that Ron admired was his simplicity. Even though Andy was famous, he didn't act like a celebrity. He preferred quiet routines, close friends, and moments of peace. When he wasn't working, Andy often spent time at his home, playing music, reading, or enjoying the outdoors. This simplicity, Ron said, was one of the reasons Andy stayed grounded throughout his career. Ron learned from Andy that fame doesn't define a person, character does. And Ron has tried to live by that principle ever since. Even with countless awards and worldwide recognition, Ron often describes himself as a storyteller, not a star. He believes that the best work speaks for itself, a belief he inherited from Andy. As the years passed, Ron also came to understand the emotional depth behind the Andy Griffith Show. When he was a child, he simply performed his lines without fully understanding the meaning of the scenes. But as an adult, Ron watched the episodes again and realized the show was not just entertainment, it was a reflection of Andy's values. Each episode carried a gentle lesson about patience, kindness, forgiveness, or doing the right thing. When Ron speaks about the show now, he describes it as a guidebook for human decency. He says that Andy didn't just act out these lessons, he lived them. And that authenticity is why people still connect with the show decades later. Ron also shared how emotional it was for him when fans approached him and said the show helped them during difficult times in their lives. Some fans said Mayberry gave them comfort during illnesses. Others said the show reminded them of their childhoods or made them feel less alone. Ron always felt touched by these stories, and he said that their emotional power belonged mostly to Andy. Andy created a character that felt like a friend, a mentor, and even a father to millions of viewers. Ron said Andy never realized how deeply he touched people because he was too humble to think of himself that way. In sharing more details about their bond, Ron also talked about how protective Andy was of him during scenes that required emotional vulnerability. When Ron had to cry or show fear, Andy made sure he felt safe. Andy never pressured him. Instead, he helped him explore the emotion gently. Ron said this taught him that emotional honesty comes from trust, not force. When Ron directs young actors today, he uses the same gentle approach. He helps them understand the character's feelings without pushing them too hard. This method not only produces better performances, but it also creates a healthy environment for young actors, something Ron believes is extremely important. Ron also explained that Andy's influence reached him even during difficult times in his career. When Ron faced criticism or self-doubt, he remembered Andy's advice to focus on the work and ignore the noise. Andy always said, "Good work lasts longer than opinions." These words helped Ron stay strong during moments when he worried about whether a film would succeed or whether he had made the right creative choice. Ron said that Andy's guidance continued to strengthen him long after Andy was gone. In the final part of his reflections, Ron spoke about how he plans to keep Andy's spirit alive. He said he doesn't want Andy to be remembered only as the sheriff of Mayberry. He wants people to remember Andy as a kind soul with a big heart, a deep thinker, a gentle leader, and a man who left every room better than he found it. Ron believes that sharing his memories helps fans understand the real Andy, the mentor who shaped him, the friend who supported him, and the man who showed him the meaning of true kindness. Ron said that Andy's impact will live on as long as people value compassion and honesty. And through every story Ron tells, every film he creates, and every lesson he passes down, Andy Griffith remains a silent partner in his work. Ron ended his reflection by saying, "Andy's gift to me wasn't just a role or a career. His gift was the example of how to live with love, patience, and humility. That is what I hope to pass on." Before Ron Howard ever stepped into the world of acting and met Andy Griffith, he was simply a curious little boy growing up in a family that believed in storytelling. Ron often talks about how his parents, both actors themselves, filled his childhood with creativity. They read books aloud, acted out scenes at home, and encouraged Ron to explore his imagination. Because of this, Ron developed a natural interest in performing long before he understood what a career was. His parents noticed that he had a calm, thoughtful personality, which was rare for children his age. They believed he might enjoy acting, not because of fame, but because he liked expressing himself through stories. So when small acting opportunities came along, they gently introduced him to the idea, making sure he never felt pressured. When Ron first began working on small roles, many people around him were surprised by how comfortable he seemed in front of the camera. He didn't freeze, stumble, or hide behind adults the way many young kids did. Instead, he watched the crew, asked questions, and listened closely to instructions. This early confidence made him stand out, and casting directors quickly noticed his natural ability. But even with rising opportunities, Ron's parents kept life simple at home. They taught him that work should never replace childhood. They encouraged playtime, school, and friendships. This balance helped Ron stay grounded, and it also built the foundation for how he would later view his career. When Ron auditioned for the Andy Griffith Show, he had no idea how much his life was about to change. He walked into the room excited but unsure, carrying the innocence of a young boy who simply loved pretending. After his audition, several crew members whispered to one another, saying they had never seen such a genuine performance from a child. But the most important reaction came from Andy Griffith himself. Andy watched young Ron with careful attention, noticing not just his acting, but the honesty behind his expressions. Andy later told people that Ron reminded him of children from his hometown, polite, bright, and full of heart. This first impression became the spark that started their lifelong connection. Ron often said that if Andy had not believed in him that day, his entire future might have been different. Andy's support gave him confidence, and that confidence helped him grow both as an actor and as a person. Looking back, Ron believes that their bond began even before their first scene together. It began the moment Andy recognized Ron's potential and treated him with kindness instead of seeing him as just another child actor. That early kindness set the tone for everything that followed, and it became the beginning of one of the most meaningful relationships in Hollywood history.